We also use Dr. Thames. We've used them both, had great results with both of them. Essentially, it's just where you can put fish in the aquarium the same day without having massive ammonia and nitrite spikes, which if you're not familiar with the nitrogen cycle, go check out my first video where Jay talks about the nitrogen cycle. I'll link it in somewhere here for you to go check that out. So it's definitely 100% required if you don't have a seated filter already. Okay? All right. All right, so you've got your established filter. We got your tank set up. All right, now what are you doing? You have these fish. Hopefully you've done some research on adding them and they're going to go well with your fish, right? What kind of fish you want to keep? Do you want to keep things that are, super active? Are you looking for something that might be a little bit more aggressive? Maybe some sort of biotope, or, maybe everything's from the same sort of region? Kind of have those sorts of questions kind of nailed out, and then kind of proceed with what size tank you're going to get, if that makes sense. Numero uno. Now you've got them, you brought them home, you've got your good fish, you got them in there. Now what do? All right. So real quick, let's talk about why we're treating these fish. I already spoke about all the transit. It's thunder in here, so you're gonna hear some thunder rumbles through here. So I told you it was raining, so you're gonna get some rumblings. So, all right, I digress. So why are we treating this fish? Think about the stress that's put on the fish from the transit from where it started to the end point of your aquarium. Our goal as Aquarius is to reduce the stress level as much as possible, right? And eliminate any pathogens that was caused from the stress. That's what we want to do. Right, so I explained in another video, I think maybe not yet, but fish health has like what I call a 3-circle diagram. You have 3 things that essentially will introduce disease in tank. You've got the host, right? You've got a fish, you've got the environment it's in, and you've got whatever pathogen that is growing, right? And in the center, when all those 3 things are present, you've got disease issues. So right now, we have to eliminate the stress and possible entry of pathogens from our environment and or the host that we're bringing in the tank, right? So we need to eliminate that. So let's break down what types of pathogens or diseases we're gonna try to get rid of in our aquarium. All right, so the first one is probably the most common problem you're ever gonna have in your aquarium as far as disease issues, especially when introducing new fish or you have other issues. And that's external parasites, specifically ick, right? Ick, if you haven't seen it, it's white spot disease. It likely comes out, if you've kept tanks long enough, I'm sure you've seen ick at some level, right? We have to do our best to eliminate it. Ick has a very crazy life cycle. And to not go into too much detail on the life cycle, because I'm doing another video on the life cycle of ick in a few, essentially it's got I'm stuttering again. It's got a life cycle that can last 14 days. So when you see white spots on your fish, when you treat the tank with what we're going to show you in a little bit what you treat it with, we have to eliminate the white spots. Essentially, they're little cells on the fish that grow these things inside of them, and they just multiply on their own. And once they get big enough, the little white spot, it pops and releases all of them down the bottom of the water. That is the phase that we have to get to eliminate the ick. We can't treat it on the fish. The chemicals that we're going to use is not strong enough to pop that little, essentially like a space capsule, essentially, like some sort of capsule. You're not reaching the ick that way. So what we try to do as hobbyists is, if you haven't heard it before, we want to increase the temperature. Increasing the temperature to probably 82 to 84 degrees is a good range to speed up that life cycle. So basically you're causing it to pop out faster so we can treat the fish and we can end the life cycle much, much quicker. Now, there's a caveat to that. You have to be treating with something strong enough to kill the ick. If you are not, you are likely to be causing a worse problem, which is if you're whatever you're going to use for it isn't strong enough, you're not using the correct dosage, you're likely to just be speeding up the life cycle into infinity. So raising the temperature up it's got to be done right, and then treating it has got to be done the right dosage. So what are you treating with? You're like, well, Dan, you told me I need to treat it, but what am I treating with? Here's what we use. So what I try to do is I go back and we use some formulations that we've made up. over the years for what we treat with as far as in our in-house production here on the farm. And I just went out and found retail products that basically matched what we were doing that was similar or close. And this was pretty much spot on the same thing we use. The formulation might be slightly different, but it's the same exact product. So we like, Icex. Icex by Hikari is probably the best external parasite medication on the market. It takes care of virtually most external parasites that you're going to have to worry about in your home aquarium. I'm not going to go and break down all the different types it's going to go into because it's not. This is meant for people that are just trying to figure out what to do. Maybe I'll break down some different parasites in a later video, but for now, this is what you want to use for your external parasites. It's the best thing on the market. It's got formalin, it's got malachite green, and methylene blue, which are basically the three main ingredients that have different properties. Like formalin's good for external parasites, malachite green's good for parasites and some fungal issues we found in the past. And then methylene blue is just something that helps keep the stress down the fish and a little bit of slime coat issues, right? It's all meant to help the fish. Now, what I do want to say using this is with a caveat. One, only uses your adult. It's got formaldehyde in it. Formaldehyde is a cancer-causing agent, and you want to make sure you're really careful with this stuff. Don't leave it open. Don't leave it around kids. None of that stuff. Don't do that. It's just something that we're using. Just be very, very careful when and how you use it. So be mindful of that. Number 2 on this, do not overdose this specific product. You can overdose it on your fish. So when you use a formalin-based product to take care of parasites, what you are doing is, without being too scientific, you're basically, if you overdose it, you're going to be removing oxygen out of the water. If you're fish nerdy and you want to know, for every for every 6 ppms of this you use, you remove 1 ppm of oxygen if you want to be super nerdy about it. You don't want to be super nerdy about it. All you got to worry about is that if you overdose this, you could be taking out more oxygen in your tank than is needed. So just use the proper dosage on the bottle for your size aquarium. Okay? Let's focus on that. All right, now we've dealt with our external parasites, external issues, and now we're talking about internal parasites. Is that really a big thing? Possibly, right? A lot of fish that have been cultured could have internal parasites of some kind. It might be more common in your aquariums than you see, but if you'd like to be on the safe side and treat them for internal parasites, you can. So how can I say this to make it a little bit easier? There's never been a great way on introducing medications for internal parasites. I know a couple people recommend using a bath treatment, right? I'm not a fan of using a bath treatment for internal parasites. I just don't think it gets absorbed well enough to be very effective. And I've seen some evidence in some different papers that it's not as effective as something that's been digested. So if we're going to use it for food, it's got to be very specific. So what do we use? So here on the farm, we use a antibiotic to deal with internal parasites and any bacterial diseases that's internal, called metronidazole. Essentially, it's just something that deals with the gut issues, but we need to add it to food. Typically, what a lot of people have done in the past is you take the powder, you put it in your food you're using, you mix a little grain alcohol with it, and you let it dry. That's been a way to use it, but it can get complicated. And then if it doesn't absorb, your fish don't like the taste of it. So there's a few issues with that.